Hi, everybody. I'm Amy Handelsman. I'm an MFA with Patty Marx and Roz Chast. They may not need introductions, but I'm going to give them an introduction anyway. Roz is a New Yorker cartoonist. She has over 12 books written and over 800 cartoons published in the New Yorker and elsewhere. Patty Marx is a novelist and a New Yorker writer. And full disclosure, Patty and I worked on a book together that she wrote with Roz illustrations called Now Everybody Really Hates Me. We sold it to CBS as a pilot. So Roz and Patty are working on a new book. I want them to talk about that, but their credits to date, and if they could just say a little bit about what each book was about. The first one was Now Everybody Really Hates Me. The second was Now I Will Never Leave the Dinner Table. The third was Meet My Staff. And the fourth was Dot in Larryland. So tell us a little about those.
Well, now that everybody really hates me, I am very fond of for many reasons. One of them is that it's the first collaboration. No, it's not the first collaboration. Can we answer a different question?
Yes. What was your first collaboration?
Roz and I met.
Yes, please.
Roz and I were both starting out in our careers. It was, we think, around 1843, right, Roz?
Yeah, yeah. It was when horses were still pulling the cars around.
And I wrote a piece in the Atlantic Monthly uh, called How to Get Along with the Russians. And it was a humor piece, believe it or not, and still relevant, believe it or not. And the illustration was by Roz. And Roz, where were you in your career then?
Just at the very beginning, it was, I think for both of us, we were practically children and we did not know each other. We were just a couple of years out of college, put it that way.
It was
And
the first thing I'd ever published. And after it was published, my mother called and she said, read your piece. I go, huh? She goes, I love the illustration. Uh, and what you should do is call the illustrator up and introduce yourself, which, like, this is a really stupid idea. And but even then, no, knowing anything, I thought it was a stupid idea, but I did it. And
and I had never, at that point I had done a number of illustrations for people. I was starting to get published a little bit in the New Yorker. Uh, but I had never gotten called by any of the people who wrote the pieces that I did the illustrations for, either to say that they liked it or that they hated it or that they wished I was dead and I wrecked everything for them. Nothing. So we had this very, very nice chat. And I have to say, I have never since then been called by uh, anyone I've illustrated a piece for. But it was a very nice conversation. And then we met each other. We turns out we had
after that play date,
yeah, after well, what it was a play date. It was like your mother set us up on a play date, basically.
right, and it worked.
And it worked. Yeah. And we've basically been on the same play date.
Yeah. So that brings us to that first book. So
Yes.
I had written a book with a friend of both of ours, all three of ours, Jane Reed Martin, and it was called Now Everybody Really Hates Me, which incidentally is a title we probably couldn't get away with now.
Because
And
it's on PC.
yeah, people don't like that. We're not allowed to use that word because then it
Yeah.
would exist. And we all know that nobody doesn't exist at all in this world.
Yes. Some people
And
just hate the word hate. They hate the word hate. Even more than I think I hate anything is they really hate the word hate.
yeah, and they hate a lot of things too.
They hate a lot of things, but
They
you're
hate a
not
lot of things.
allowed to say hate. So
This was a book about a little girl who is sent to her room for hitting her brother Theodore, though she explains she didn't hit him, she touched him hard.
mhm.
And she vows to stay in the room for the rest of her life unless they're having something good to eat that night, in which case it will be her last meal. And one thing I like about this book is that it contains one of my very, very favorite Roz cartoons, and there are a lot of favorite cartoons of Roz for me. But this one is the little girl. Oh, you want to describe it,
Yeah,
Roz?
sure. She's a little girl. She's in her room, and she said, "Well, you sending me to my room. I'll stay here. I'm going to stay here forever." And then there's a picture of her, drawing of her, and she's an old lady, and she's wearing like an old lady skirt and old lady shoes, and she's got her hair in an old lady bun and old lady glasses. And then there's a sign and an arrow, and it points to her, and it says, "Me, age 40."
Hmm.
So
Says
yeah,
it all right. It's
so
so sad
sad.
now. So sad when me age 40 was like,
Yeah, it was just
I can't remember
unimaginable.
being that young.
40, it's like you're practically dead. But it's a I love that book. It's one of my favorites of
Yeah.
the
And the other thing, that was the first time that we'd published a book, so it was our first book tour, and it was just really fun, and we got lots of great comments. And one of them was, we were at Dalton, a progressive private school in New York City, and one kid asked two things. One is, do you think that she needs Ritalin, the girl? And do you think that she's suicidal? Whereas in Boston, we were asked, how many inches apart do you live? Which is my all-time favorite question I've
Yeah,
ever been asked.
it's a
And
great
then there was another kid who said in Boston, do you know my grandmother? She lives in New York. And then, no, we don't. Do you know the Stearns? They live in New York. No, we don't. That like went on and on. And finally the kid goes, do you know anybody? And Roz, do you remember that crackpot in Philadelphia?
Oh yeah, that was really beyond the beyond. We were with Jane Reed Martin, who co-wrote the book with Patty. And well, first there was a sort of telltale thing in that it was summer, but she was there and she had this giant parka on. And she was very angry, and she said, "I can tell that." Well, first of all, she said, "All three of you are ugly." And then she said, "And I can tell that none of the three of you believe in God." And I think
Or
that we,
like children.
or like, yes, or like children. And I think I apologized. I just did not know what else to say. I said, "Boy, I'm really sorry." I don't know what I was apologizing for, but it just seemed like a good time to sort of like put out a blanket apology. Like, "I'm sorry I was born. I'm sorry we're in the same room. Whatever I've done, I'm sorry." Um, so yeah, we've definitely had some very interesting things on tour.
Yeah.
And
So you have two adult books that you wrote, right?
You
right.
do?
With long titles. Why don't you write my eulogy now so I can correct it? Colon, a mother's suggestions. And two, you can only yell at me for one thing at a time. Rules for couples. So was the process of writing a kid's book different than an adult book?
No. Would you say, Roz? I mean, there.
Not illustrating. I mean, I'm the illustrator, so I feel like in many ways m- I write my my stuff is sort of like for children who are feel that they're not quite comfortable being children, that they're more like adult type children, and adults who aren't quite comfortable being adults.
Hmm.
So uh, I feel like a lot of my stuff falls into that odd little bracket. I think of like Edward Gorey, or I don't know. I mean, he's so great. I don't mean to compare myself to him, but I just yeah, like what I was saying.
Yeah,
Well, how do
I
you guys
write for
work together?
myself, and I
Oh,
write. I would say the advantage of writing for children is that you need fewer words. But other than that, I'm kind of writing with the same sensibility and the same sense of humor. And certainly the way in which Roz and I collaborated on the children's books and the adult books were the same, and it highly collaborative. I would say I kind of get an initial idea. We talk about it. I do a draft. I give it to Roz. She makes suggestions. I make suggestions for illustrations with the understanding, for both of us, you don't have to do this, but
Mhm.
I often do. And so it's really been that way with all of our books.
Yeah, I would say, you know, for me, most of the time I do work on my own. When I do my cartoons, um, they're my ideas, it's my drawing, it's my writing. But I have done books with other people, and certainly illustrated pieces for people. Uh, but working with Patty is unusual in that it's a true collaboration. It's not just like, here's the manuscript, now do the pictures. Um, there's a kind of Venn diagram overlap where, because Patty is also very visual and can see things and can make suggestions, and I do a little bit of writing, and so sometimes we can, so there is this area where we both, and I think we also both uh you know always want the project to be wonderful, and so that is, we trust each other, that we're not, I don't feel like so protective of some drawing that, if Patty says, why don't we do this instead or make a suggestion, I don't think, well, really, well, that is just my department, so you just want the project to be good.
Yeah, I think that's really important in collaborating, in case anybody wants to do it, that you want the project to be good. You have no real ego involved. I mean,
Yeah,
and you trust the other person's taste. I mean, Roz and I share a sensibility, which I think would be hard if we didn't, because it's
yeah.
not if one person's right. Well, we're both right, but uh, there. I once, I don't even know if it got published. There's like a children's book author. I think she was really successful. Something like Marion Engelbright or somebody. Did you ever hear of that
Hmm,
person?
hmm.
And I was supposed to write and I did write the story, and it was about these little bunnies, and it's the kind of stuff, her illustrations, the kind of stuff I hated then, I hate it now. It was very Victorian and pretty and complicated, and I suggested something, and she said, my public would never allow me to do that.
Mm, mm. Yeah.
And it
Whereas I
was
think,
these bunnies, and they were dressed up as humans, and I said, well, what if they went to a museum? And she said, bunnies would never go to a museum. I thought, start about what bunnies do. They're not wearing clothes either.
that's really funny. See, now all the bunnies I talk to, they do go to museums.
Can you guys each talk a little bit about the genesis of your ideas, either like Roz, things in your house or kids, and the influence for both of you of your childhood on your work?
I think that for me, a lot of my visual mental Rolodex is stuff from my childhood, probably. Uh, y- I mean, I draw a lot of interiors. I'm much, much happier drawing interiors than the woods. I mean, speaking of bunnies and that, I worked on a book, a children's book once. I illustrated it, and it was a funny book. It was a nice book, but it took place all in the woods. And for me, I didn't realize it until I was doing it, how nightmarish that was, because I grew up in Brooklyn. And so I didn't have this whole, image bank of stuff to draw. And it was like, okay, it's a double page spread and it's the woods. So what's in the woods? Okay, there's some trees. All right, so what's on the floor?
Mhm.
Uh, some leaves, and the picture still looks awful. Maybe some sticks, rocks. Maybe I'll put some more leaves. I mean, it was just like, it was really hard to make it look sort of natural. And I do remember there was this wonderful Disney quote about his cartoons and the backgrounds. And he said, the way to make it very believable is to always put in more detail than the person can take in when they're watching the cartoon. And, I know that there's people, they love minimalism and, more geometric sort of, I don't know, cartoons. But that really stuck with me because I love detail. I love detail in drawings. And when I'm drawing an interior, I feel like I can draw detail till the cows come home. I want I want people to, if I draw a coffee table and there's a drawer in the coffee table, I want people looking at that cartoon to know that if they opened the drawer of this two-dimensional coffee table, that they would know what was inside of it, you know? Um, so anyway, long story short, for me, yes, this stuff from my childhood definitely in so many ways, but at the very least visually, the interiors, because that's where what I know. I know interiors, rugs, tables, furniture, lamps. I love drawing lamps, the backs of television sets, you know.
Mhm.
I also don't go outside. That's one thing Roz and I share, both a dislike for nature, and we were brought up that way. And even when, like, if you take a picture of nature, you better put a person in. Otherwise, I'm not really interested in looking at it. And Roz and I like to tell the story of Paul, who's right in the room beyond that. His mother, also a Brooklyn person, was once driving along and pointed to something outside the car and said, "Look, a picture of a deer." And that's how we feel about nature. Um, I get my ideas. I think the question was, where do you get your ideas?
Oh,
I get them. Well, it wasn't all. It was also how were you? Obviously, I was influenced by my childhood, and a lot of my references are about that. I grew up in suburban Philadelphia, and at some point, I thought it was just. I learned the word bourgeois and never stopped using it for about 5 years. And so I now live in the city. I don't know why I feel like I'm talking to the shrink now. Yeah, I get ideas. I don't know. Yeah, just come, or they don't come. Every once in a while, if I'm writing a humor piece, I try to kind of almost like uh, mathematically figure it out, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. One example I can think of is I once wanted to write a humor piece. I don't think it was a shout I turned it into, and I thought, what's my favorite? What is one of my favorite um, themes? And it would be sibling rivalry, because I won sibling rivalry. As you know, there's the abused and the abuser, and I was the abuser, and I clearly won. So it's always been kind of a pleasant theme for me. And I thought, what would be the worst sibling rivalry you could ever have? And I thought, well, that would be if you were the kid sister to Jesus Christ. And I wrote a humor piece, which was really easy to do because I was just thinking, like, that must be what my brother and sister think I am, because I could do no wrong. And that worked out pretty well. But usually it's something somebody says or some idea I have, and I try to force it into a shouts or something. With the first adult book that Roz and I wrote, it was easy. It was about my mother, and Roz came up with the idea that, well, you want to say how we
yeah.
came up with
Well,
that idea?
Patty's mother has so many great sort of I, words of advice, words of wisdom, and oh God, for some reason, never serve salmon at a dinner party. It is boring. Nature, if seen at all, is best seen from a car. plaids should never be based in white. Um, if you never wear red and black together, or you'll look like a drum majorette. They were just, there were tons of them, and they were, some of them made no sense at all. Some of them were made complete sense, but all of them were funny. And I told Patty, I thought we should collect them, and I'd be happy to draw them. So that was very fun. But getting ideas, I did think of one time I totally just took an idea from something that one of my kids said, where I did a cartoon based completely, just took it almost as it happened. When my younger kid was about 16 and she was doing her math homework in the living room, and she was listening to music on a boombox. And there's nothing that's more horrible in the eyes of a teenager than to watch an adult dancing, especially if that adult is your parent. And so I just wanted to see if she was paying attention. Basically, I can't dance, and it was like I was just kind of doing a little dance, and she looked up and she said, "Mom, stop! You're hurting me." and it was like a perfect line. So I did a cartoon called When Moms Dance, and the kids looking up and saying, the mom is doing a dance and the kid is looking up and saying, "Stop, you're hurting me." So yeah, I mean, sometimes ideas fall into your lap like that. Other times you're just staring at, the blazing island of white, as Bill Woodman, cartoonist, used to call the piece of paper when you have no ideas.
And there's no way to know. I mean, I get ideas all the time, and the execution is harder. But then when you're like, must manufacture idea, because I either by deadline or I've worked for TV shows. And the first TV show I worked for, and I wrote about this I just lifted it and wrote about it in my first novel, was Saturday Night Live. And we had to come up with a lot of jokes. And it was my first job. I was terrified. And I would call my parents, who basically were my servants my entire childhood. And I would say, "I've got to come up with a cold opening, and it has to be really funny." And my mother would they'd had an intercom to go, my father's name was Richard, they called him Dick. "Dick, meet in the den. We have to come up with ideas." And my father would try so hard. He'd go, what if they have to do, and I would say, because I was both desperate and needy, but also condescending and patronizing. So I go, I said, "That's so," what did I say? "That's too jokey." I said, "It's too jokey." And my father goes, "Isn't that the point?" And for years after I worked at Saturday Night Live, my brother and my parents would go, "What if you did?" I go, they were on to something else, but I kind of outgrown that. But
Patty, can you talk a little bit about working in publishing versus TV versus film?
Sure. In the first job I ever had was a Saturday Night Live. I mean, if you don't count some stupid jobs I had in high school. And my writing partner was Doug McGrath. And though I love writing with Roz, and it's I think synergistic, and it was with Doug too. I will say, if I had to give someone advice about starting out as a writer, I would say, don't start out, maybe do, doing something collaboratively, because it was so much fun. But I got so dependent on Doug that when we finally wrote alone, I had no confidence in being a writer. It took me a long time to kind of think, is this funny? I don't know, because you have that sounding board, and even more so when you're doing it as co-writers, because you are in that room together. And we had a ball, and I still adore him and I'm friends with him. But so that was, and writing at Saturday Night Live is, maybe it is like other TV shows, I don't really know, but it was unique in my experience. I've written for other TV shows. Uh, and there's that pressure that you have, but there's also, you do it quick and it's rejected or accepted. I loved it. I mean, I peer group pressure is a real kind of operative thing on me. So whatever anybody thinks, I think that too. But so well, not peer group pressure, but so everybody would be complaining all the time, don't make us work round the clock. But I loved it. I mean, it was like writers camp for me. Or there at 4 a.m. and I'd be thinking, please make us work Sunday too. It was just fun, 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 fun. And that's TV. But then there's the TV writing where you're in your room and you're writing a script, uh, which is a different kind of writing, and it's also the same. I mean, it's more about architecture than about, nobody's going to look at it really, your words. It's meant to be heard and to be part of a structure. Um, and writing short is different than writing long. If I were paid the same for everything, I would write little short things. I like being in control of the whole picture. Whereas like with a novel or with a screenplay, I don't really know how it's going to come out. I know what the small uh, picture looks like, and I control it, and I like controlling the little. The big is a little unwieldy for me,
Mhm.
but there is a momentum that takes over when you're writing something big that you don't get when you're writing something small. You're always starting from square one when you're writing something
Mhm.
small. Not literally true. I mean not really, but more than with the big thing.
So, so to that point, Roz, when you were writing your graphic memoir, um, can we talk about something more pleasant, which I've given innumerable times as a gift, first starting with my sisters. Was the rhythm of the writing and the drawing for you different than writing a single cartoon?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a lot of what Patty was saying. It's uh different from writing a cartoon because a cartoon is so sort of self-contained, you know. You have an idea, and I mean, even for me, a cartoon that's 1 or 2 pages is still this containable thing, uh, where you have an idea and then you have, either 1 box or 3 boxes or four, or maybe if it's a full page, it's 9 or 12 boxes, or if it's 2 pages, maybe it's 18 or 24 boxes, but you have this sort of thing that has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and you can sort of see it all at once. Um, Working on that book, I had never done anything like that before, and it took me a long time to sort of figure it out. I would say one of the most helpful things, maybe the most helpful thing in figuring it out was I knew that, well, one thing that was extremely helpful is that with that particular story, I had a very clear sense of the beginning and what the middle was, kind of, and then where it ended up, because it was nonfiction and I knew that it started with my parents declining, and then it was the story of their decline, and then, sorry, and then it would end more or less with my parents' cremains in my closet. Um, Although, as you know, there was a postscript to the story, because they're not in my closet anymore. And also, as I was writing it, it wasn't quite as straightforward. There was as I was writing it, I had to give not I had to, I wanted to give a context for it because my relationship with my parents was kind of complicated. And I felt like I needed to explain put some background. But the most helpful thing anybody told me about it was I was at my shrink, and I was saying, I have the story and I don't know how to tell it, because I was thinking in terms of a 1 page or a 2 pager for the New Yorker, where it was just box after box after box. And I just could not seem to do it. And he said, what about chapters? And it was like, whoa, books. I, I just had completely, because I had never written anything with chapters before. And even when I had a story to tell, it was always just this number of boxes. I thought of it as just like this infinite number of boxes. And how was I going to do this? And once he said chapters, it was like I sort of saw it. And also, when you do chapters, you can move them around a little bit. You can sort of finish one piece and then do chapter 2 and then do chapter 3. And then as you're looking at it, you think, or maybe when it's all done, maybe when you're up to chapter 6, you say, actually, I think I want to move chapter 5 to chapter 3, but it's not like now I have to start all over again because I've told, you know, I don't know. So it was really, that was very helpful thinking of it as chapters.
Mhm.
I had, when I wrote my first novel, I was scared to death. And I have a friend who is, I think, the best editor in the world. And he gave me a piece of advice that seemed really banal, but it was really helpful. And I think it's continued to help me when I write, which is write the book that only you can write.
Mhm.
And I think when you start writing, and even when you have written for a long time, you think you should write what has been written, and write the story and structure it the way it's been structured, and that is like a recipe for failing, because you didn't get there first, and even if you might be able to do it better, it will be derivative. So I thought that was really, really, really helpful. And he also said, keep me surprised. And I think that's the thing that is scary, but also liberating, where like you make the rules, you can keep changing it. And it's why I don't believe in outlines really for books, because then if you know where it's going, then the reader knows where it's going.
Mm.
And it should be kind of like life. It should kind of like veer where there shouldn't be the rules that you've read about. And that was really, really helpful, to just kind of be open to surprise, and never write anything that you think is predictable, because it's
Mm.
boring.
Mm.
Yeah. I think also different things work for different people. I mean,
Yeah.
I think I agree so much with what you're saying, especially write the book that only you can write. And it does sound like sort of simple, almost banal advice, but it's not. Um, and at least for me, I feel like when I start, like I'm working on a book right now, and it's not like in between the book about my parents and this, I wrote a book about New York. It's like going back to square one every time for me. I'm not a formulaic writer. I don't do an outline. I'm not somebody who's going to, I was reading about, was it Barbara Cartwright or Cartland, or one of those like romance novelists? She has like 700 books. I don't know how people do that. I mean, for me, I have so much, maybe I'm just thick or something. I've got to like figure it out from scratch every time when I start, because every book is different. And I can't just force them all into the same mold. It's that for me is not only pointless for the book, it's just so boring and it feels wrong. It's like every book, it's kind of like, not to make everything about like children, but it's like each one is the same rules for one kid are not going to be the same exact rules for the other kid. And then you have to like figure out like how do you sort of, because everybody is different, you know?
Mhm.
So every book is different. Every book has different rules, and you have to figure out what is going to work best for that book, not like some idea of writing, the rules for writing. I mean, these things, there probably are some, but for me, that's absolutely not helpful.
Yeah,
You
Mhm.
know?
I'd agree with that. I think that this is a sad truth, but you learn how to write the book while you're writing the book,
Mhm.
which is like,
Totally.
then I go to the end, I go, I could do this so much better now, but you don't get that opportunity. And Roz is saying, like Barbara Cartland, those kind of writers, I think they're public, that's what their readers want sort of the same thing.
Right.
I admire somebody in a way for being able to write the same thing over and over and over again, because it's just so, as you said, Roz, it seems so boring and kind of fraudulent almost, but
But
it's a different kind of thing.
Mhm.
mainly like then you're just working on a factory line and it's
Yeah.
like, well, I guess the widget goes over here.
Yeah.
Next
Yeah.
book, there's the widget, you know.
I know readers, good readers too, who also like bad books for when they don't want to think. So I guess it's those books where you're just going, and now I can kind of figure out who killed him because of this and that.
Mhm. I'm going to interrupt just to say something I should have said in the beginning, which is that if you have questions, please put them in the chat. At about 7 minutes, 5 minutes, we're going to take some questions, and we're going to have a little bonus at the end before we wrap up the evening. Can you both talk about how you structure your creative day and if anything changed during the pandemic?
My my week has hardly changed at all. uh I mean, I work at home. I've always worked at home since I started. uh I feel very fortunate that the New Yorker has continued to operate. They still have it's a weekly magazine, so the art meetings are on a weekly schedule. And I'm not super structured. As far as my work week goes, I like Patty. I don't go outside very much. I do a lot of puttering from one project to another. And with as the deadline for me, which is Monday night, approaches for the cartoons, that's when you know m- I write ideas down all during the week. It's just kind of what I do. Uh, but I like the pressure to some extent of when I have to actually put those ideas on paper and make decisions. I like the pressure of having the deadline in front of me, because then I feel like my instincts are working most clearly. If I have too much time, I'm likely to sort of like get into like, well, maybe I should do it this way. Maybe I should do it that way. Oh, does that hand look right? Maybe you know, but really working, I like having to sort of uh, work with some kind of pressure. But then I have other projects. If I'm not working in my studio drawing the cartoons, I've been doing Pisanki eggs or embroidery projects, which are cartoons. They're still my style, but all kinds of other. So
Mhm.
yeah, it's not so different from my work life is not really very different from what it was before the pandemic.
Do you miss the dropping off the cartoons, the drawings on Tuesdays at the New Yorker? Is that when it used to be, Tuesdays or
Yeah,
Wednesdays?
yeah, but I haven't done that in person. I hated that. And once I realized, and this tells you how long ago I stopped, when I realized the fax machine
Mm.
worked, um, that it had nothing to do with whether I sold or not. I think showing cartoons in person to the editor and having to sit there while they're looking through your cartoons with my needy little face on display, it's just too pathetic. So I'd much rather that they, do that when I'm not looking.
It must have been terrible for them too, to have to look at your cartoon while you're there trying to pretend you're blasé, but not really. It's a bad situation.
It's a bad situation. But I think when I started, when was, because I started when I was 23, and my first editor was the wonderful, wonderful Lee Lorenz. And I then I liked going in person, because I think it was just like this magical kind, and I hated it because it was so, totally, even thinking about it now, I'm digging my nails into my palms. It was very, very cringy, but I felt it was very important that I show up in person. And I liked seeing the other cartoonists. I made friends with a few of them. I know a few of them. I heard later when I started. I was, the youngest by some 10 years, and also the only girl. And Lee told me that, and my work was also, but that was like the tip of the iceberg of why they didn't like me. I mean, my work was like so completely different. And Lee told me later, years later, he said that some of the older guys asked if he owed my family money. uh, but when I was young, when I was very young, like in my 20s, I did like going in person, because but then not after that. And then I had kids and moved out of the city, and it was just not worth all of that.
What about your process, Patty? I think you told me that you like the pandemic.
I love the pandemic. But I am starting not to, just to make sure that you know, it's not that I like the people dying or New York falling apart or the economy. I'm not an outdoor plant. I like being inside. I like having an excuse not to do everything I want to get out of. I like the way you're allowed to watch more TV. I like Roz. Well, I wouldn't say my work life has really changed that much. Somehow, with less to do, I have more to do. I can't do that. I've got to run the Roomba now. Um, and I'm just busy all the time doing nothing. I wouldn't say the word structure comes into my day. I am always working and never working.
Yes.
Like Roz, we stay up late, so I hate the morning, always hated the morning, always. Whenever I have to get up, no matter when I've gone to bed, I just hate it. No matter when I've gotten up, I hate going to bed. So I like to work in bed late at night after like the TV session with my boyfriend that ends around 2. Then I work um, and I hate and love deadlines. I get really, really anxious, um, and kind of a little unhappy, but it does work. And I always think I can't write this piece. I just can't. And then somehow you struggle and you struggle and struggle, and then you turn this corner and you see what the thing is about and you can do it. And it's not like you'd think, because I used to complain, but now I know that it's gonna people are gonna move away from me if I keep it up. So I don't complain quite as much. But people like trying to just get off the phone, they go, well, you've done it before. I go, this time it's different.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, I have the same thing with turning in batches of cartoons. Whenever I turn in that week, I always think, that's it. There's no more ideas. That's it. It's funny when people ask about like writer's block or cartoonist block, and I think that's my life. That's what I mean, or like self, doubt, or I think that partly I do this because doing anything else seems even worse.
Oh yeah, and what are you gonna do?
Yeah,
I was
what
just going to ask you, what would you do if you weren't doing what you were doing?
If you could just start again and you had talent to other things?
Well, let's
Or
say if you could do something else, what would you do? If you
You
had
mean
the
if I were
if you had the capability.
had the capability?
Oh, well,
Doctor.
I would love to be an artist. I would like to be a lighting designer. I would like to study diseases because I love diseases, hate sick people. But I'd like to be in a hospital. Roz and I both think that we probably, because we bring the freshness of the outsider to it, could probably cure cancer.
Yeah,
We set our mind to it.
I'd like to be a doctor if I were smarter.
Would you like to talk to sick people? I would not.
Yeah.
You're better.
Maybe I'd hire somebody because doctors make a lot of money, so you could hire a talker.
Mm.
You could, like whisper like what
Yeah.
know.
I'd like to be a diagnostician.
Ooh, that
You know,
sounds
yeah, people start with. What else would I like to be? I'd like to be. I'm pretty good at mindless jobs. Like if you go chop the celery, I'm pretty good at that.
You could be the sous chef.
I could be the sous chef.
So Roz, when you mentioned Edward Gorey, what other cartoonists, as when you were a kid or not a kid, influenced you or did you love?
Charles Adams, always when I was a kid. I loved what I guess used to be called when I was a kid sick humor or black humor. I loved Charles Adams. He made that gothic sort of thing funny. I loved Edward Gorey. I loved Sam Gross, Gay and Wilson.
Mhm.
I loved the comics in the back of the National Lampoon when I was a teenager. When I was, I guess they called them tweens now, like 11, 12-year-olds. I loved Mad Magazine
Mm.
because I was at that age where I would watch TV and see these ads and I would just think, this is like the stupidest thing I ever saw. And Mad Magazine made fun of advertising in a way that I had never, they made fun of pop culture.
Mhm.
And I loved that because I felt in my own 11-year-old way, I felt sort of, once Barbie was sort of fading into the past, Barbie and her Tetley tea kettle, swimming pool was fading into the past. There was so much, I was just like this sort of snotty, angry little kid who just thought everything was stupid.
Mhm.
And Mad Magazine was very good at expressing that.
Mhm.
So yeah, I
Mhm.
love that.
And Patty, who did you read as a kid? What books, what authors did you read?
Suddenly I can't remember. Um, but I will say, as a really young kid, when I was doing picture books, I liked Dr. Seuss. I liked uh, Sid Huff.
Eloise? Did you
What?
like Eloise?
Who? What?
Eloise? Did you like Eloise?
I never read Eloise.
Mm.
It's a long story. I'll tell you later. But I liked anything that was funny, and interesting because I can remember some of the books, and I have some of the books that I liked, like Sid Huff, Dr. Seuss. The style I liked both in the writing and the visuals is the same. I mean, I still respond to that. It's like you leave the gate with the same sense of humor. I mean, it was a little bit subversive. I thought jokes were just really funny, but I mean, I did like Edward Gorey, but I also liked Bennett Cerf's book of jokes. I just thought, oh my God, they're so funny. And I and then as I I had a father who was very proud of not censoring and giving me books that were inappropriate for my age. And so I liked things like the the Gunter Grass
The Tin Drum.
the Tin Drum, just really sick thing. But I didn't really, I would understand up to the level I could and should understand. Like it didn't seem, I remember reading To Kill a Mockingbird, and it's not that I read it too soon because I didn't. It was just that I was a little dense and didn't understand things. And I remember getting to the part about rape and thinking, I don't think that's probably very important, whatever rape is. You just keep going ahead. I mean, it's sort of amazing how kids will take in what they can take in and like it, maybe not even for the right reasons. I read a lot, but I don't know what I read a lot. I mean, I guess I liked funny books.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Are there books that you've gone back to, either of you, that you had a different reaction to, you appreciated more, or you found that you didn't respond to anymore?
Hmm. I read not that many years ago. I reread Anna Karenina. Pretty much I liked everything when I was a kid. I wasn't really discriminating, and I also wasn't like ADD, so it was like really concentrated. I wasn't thinking, now I'm going to go over and I'm going to go get that. So I read Anna Karenina, and I remember thinking, boy, that woman needs Prozac. I mean, uh, you know, it just seems she seems so kind of spoiled. Books I've gone back to. Hmm. No, it's more with movies that I have that reaction where I think, I can't believe I liked that or didn't like that. Because with movies more than books, I think I was reacting usually against what everybody else was. You know, everyone liked that, I won't like it. Or, and then when you kind of relax and your opinion isn't determined by what everybody else's opinion is, then I can kind of enjoy the movie in a way I couldn't back then.
And what are you guys working on now? You're doing a fifth children's book?
We are.
Yes.
Can you talk about it yet?
Well, one thing that's interesting is we have somebody that I think is interested, and we wrote it as a picture book, but they think it should be a more of a graphic novel,
Mhm.
which we thought was a kind of an exciting and different idea that we liked the idea.
Yeah, absolutely. For like slightly older
Mhm.
kids, which I think would sort of suit our sensibilities very well in a way.
Because we're no longer 6 years old in mentality. We're more like 8-year-olds now.
That's right. We've like grown up. We've grown
Mhm.
up a little bit. Yeah.
Mhm. Do we have any questions from the viewers?
Do we have any viewers?
No.
Okay. Do you guys want to do your bonus?
Yeah.
Sure.
Roz and I have a ukulele band called the Ukulele Meltdown, and in our minds, were very big deals. Very, very big deals.
Yes. And our specialty is songs that are within the public domain because one of our pet peeves is getting sued. And Patty writes the lyrics and I try to figure out the chords. So because of Zoom's limitations, we can't harmonize, and I put that word in quotes. So I'm going to sing the first verse and then Patty's going to sing the second. So this is to the tune of Row, Row, Row Your Boat. Zoom, zoom, zoom with mom, leave the mute alone. No, 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 let's just use the phone.
Zoom, zoom, zoom with that. Yes, my home's a sty. Sit down, sit down, sit down, sit down. You didn't zip your fly.
Okay,
Now we have another.
another one. And this one is called Oh, Give Us a Drink. And because of the Zoom limitations, we're going to sing one line at a time. So please bear with us.
Okay, I'm going to start.
Okay.
Oh, give us a drink.
Not a drink from the sink,
But a drink from a Western saloon.
or maybe some wine of any old kind to
Us we're crooning on.
to.
That's it.
How did this act start?
What'd you say?
How did it start? How did how did your musical collaboration start?
Well, I many years ago, many summers ago, was invited to a wedding, and the guests were asked to bring a musical instrument if they had one. It was when it was coincident with the eclipse, this solar eclipse, and we were going to sing "Here Comes the Sun," and I. Despite my parents' intentions and lessons that they gave me, played no instrument whatsoever. But I thought, how hard could a ukulele be? And so I bought this online because it was such a beautiful color. And Roz.
And Patty said to me, this is so much fun. You got to get a ukulele. So I went to the Amazon site and, $49, got one in the same color because I'm very competitive. And you'll notice it has a little shark bridge here, which is like the greatest thing. And was completely smitten. I mean, you can learn. I had played the guitar a little bit before this, so I had a general idea of what chords were. But if you go on YouTube, there's like a bazillion tutorials. it's, as you can see, there are only 4 strings on a ukulele. And you can learn, if you know the G, the C, and the F chord, you can play almost anything. And I've just never made, for $49, this is about as much fun as a person can have. So yeah.
Great.
So we've
So
been
we-
playing, and the worse we get, the more gigs we get.
Yeah, it's a
That's
crazy thing.
that's a good racket. So one final question from Bob Reeves, who's our boss. Patty, does teaching a workshop on humor make your own work harder or easier or neither?
When I first started teaching humor, I thought, this is great, I'll steal all their ideas. But I never stole any. But you do come up with ideas as you're, I don't know, I don't think it affects it one way or the other. But I love teaching humor, and for many, many reasons, and it's 7:57, so I won't go into it, but it's a fun thing to teach. And has it affected my humor? Not really. I mean, in that it's made me exposed to more varieties of humor, and that's got to sink in a little bit. I mean, we spend a lot of time reading pieces we think are funny and watching videos we think are funny. So, so my frame of reference is wider, but I don't know if that really makes you a better writer. I mean, it makes you I believe the only thing you can improve in as far as writing is editing yourself. I think that the inspiration and the voice and your ideas you start out with, and that you do get better at and faster at editing yourself.
Mhm. And Roz, you come from an educational background. Do you teach as well as create?
No. I think that's what my parents thought I was going to do when I went to art school, that eventually I would become an art teacher or something. But I knew that was probably, hopefully not, I'm not, I don't think I'm that good at figuring out how to tell somebody
Mhm.
how to do something.
I have a question, Ross. What do you think makes a good art teacher? I mean, you've had some good art teachers, some bad art teachers. Why were the good ones good?
The 2 best art teachers I ever had, one of them, what he had was a gift, I think, for seeing what a person wanted to do and then help draw that out of the person, rather than like have a theory and then make the person fit into that theory. I he was able to sort of see that, like, okay, this person wants to be a cartoonist, what's going to make their talent stronger, rather than like, oh, cartoons are stupid, don't be a cartoonist, why don't you draw more like so and so. The other wonderful teacher, that my second favorite teacher, was I took drawing classes at the Art Students League when I was in high school, and we drew from the figure. And this was really a technical thing. We would draw with charcoal on a big pad of newsprint, draw the figure, and he would go around the classroom and he would make tiny corrections on the drawings, sometimes just like using his finger to like take out a little piece of your charcoal, like open this space up here, or use the charcoal to kind of put a line over here. So it was just these little tiny micro adjustments to the drawing that you had done. And he had such a good eye that he was able to take whatever drawing you had done and make it a good drawing. And then you just kind of basically, over the years, see what he was doing and try to copy it.
Mhm.
So, yeah.
Well, it's 8 o'clock. If you guys want to do a finale, an encore, we'll close with that.
Well, we don't have any, do we?
Oh, okay.
We had to go get one, but
Yeah,
No, that's
it's
good.
8.
It's 8 o'clock. Okay. So thank you
invite us
so
back.
much.
We'll play some more.
Okay.
Okay. Thank
Thanks
you,
a million.
Thank you, Amy. Thank
Patty.
you.
Thanks, Amy. Talk later.
Bye.
Bye.